Forget everything you think you know about the person you call an empath. You have been sold a lie. Pop culture and armchair psychology have painted this picture of a fragile, tear-eyed individual who absorbs the world's pain and crumbles under the weight of it. You've been taught to look at them as soft. You've been taught to look at them as prey. That is the most dangerous miscalculation you can make in human interaction. To understand what an empath actually is, we have to strip away the emotion and look at the raw mechanics of human survival. True empathy is not a spiritual gift. It is a hyper-adapted neurological trait. It is a survival mechanism born out of the necessity to read environments with zero margin for error. While you are walking into a room looking at the furniture and listening to the small talk, the empath is running a high-level behavioral analysis. They are registering the slight shift in your vocal pitch when you mention your career. They are cataloging the micro-expressions of contempt that flash across your face for 1/5 of a second. They are watching your baseline, your normal state of being, and instantly detecting every single deviation. They know when you are lying before you even finish formulating the sentence. They are human polygraphs, silently gathering terabytes of psychological data on you. For the vast majority of their lives, they use this data to heal. They use their behavioral profiling to comfort, to connect, and to de-escalate. They absorb your stress and reflect back warmth because their primary operating system is designed for connection. But this operating system has a fail-safe. What happens when you mistake their kindness for weakness? What happens when a toxic individual, a narcissist, or a manipulator decides to push them too far, believing they can break them without consequence? When you break an empath, you do not destroy them. You trigger an adaptation. You force their nervous system to pivot from connection to self-preservation. And in that moment, all of that psychological data they have been passively collecting on you, it becomes weaponized. In the next few minutes, I am going to walk you through the exact anatomy of this transition. I am going to show you the psychological shift that turns a healer into a surgeon. If you have ever been targeted, this will be your blueprint for understanding your own power. And if you are currently trying to manipulate someone you think is weak, you need to watch every single second of this, because you are about to trigger a sequence of events you cannot survive. Welcome. What you just witnessed in that breakdown is the reality of human behavior that most people are too afraid to acknowledge. Today we are dissecting the fracture point of the empath. I am going to break down the exact sequence of events that occurs when an empathetic person is pushed past the point of no return. Do not click away, because by the end of this presentation, you will possess a terrifyingly accurate understanding of how the most compassionate people in your life can become your absolute worst nightmare. You will learn the difference between affective empathy and tactical empathy, and why surviving the wrath of a broken empath is nearly impossible for a manipulator. Let's get into it. You have to understand that manipulators and empaths are drawn together like magnets. It's a perfect, tragic ecosystem. The manipulator seeks someone to consume. The empath seeks someone to heal. When a predator begins testing the boundaries of an empath, they usually do it slowly. A slight insult dressed as a joke, a broken promise, a moment of gaslighting. The predator thinks they are getting away with it. They think the empath is naive. But here is the behavioral reality. The empath sees everything. They aren't blind to the manipulation. They are simply making a conscious choice to offer grace. They are overriding their own alarm bells, hoping their compassion will change you. They are filing away your tactics, your insecurities, and your emotional triggers in a mental dossier. You aren't fooling them. You are just filling out your own profile. Then comes phase 2, the fracture. There is a precise moment where the empath realizes that you are not broken and in need of fixing, but rather you are malicious and in need of stopping. This is the fracture. It is not a loud, explosive argument. It is a chilling, silent drop in internal temperature. When this boundary is finally breached, the empath's brain shifts gears. They shut off their affective empathy, the part of them that feels your pain and cares about your well-being. But they retain their cognitive empathy, the ability to perfectly understand how your mind works. This is the most dangerous combination of traits in behavioral profiling. They now understand you perfectly, and they care about you zero. Phase 3 is the reversal. When you break an empath, they do not seek revenge in the traditional sense. They do not scream, they do not key your car, and they do not start a smear campaign. They execute a surgical strike on your reality because they know your deepest insecurities, the ones you never spoke aloud but leaked through your body language and behavioral loops. They know exactly where your foundation is weak. They will stop validating you. They will remove the emotional supply you have become addicted to. They will look at you with dead, clinical eyes, mirroring your true self back to you. A broken empath will systematically dismantle your control by simply refusing to play the game, while simultaneously placing boundaries so rigid they shatter your ego. They will walk away and leave you alone with the one person you cannot stand to be with, yourself. The regret of breaking an empath doesn't come from a loud explosion. It comes from the haunting silence that follows. It comes from the realization that you had someone who was willing to love you at your worst, and in your arrogance you forced them to use their ultimate gift to see right through you. Never mistake a hyper-observant nature for a soft target. Empathy is a tool. It can build a bridge, or it can dismantle a bomb. If you choose to become the threat, do not be surprised when they diffuse you and walk away without looking back. We live under a collective delusion regarding what empathy actually is. If you ask the average person to define an empath, they will describe someone who is fragile, excessively emotional, and endlessly accommodating. They picture a soft, bleeding heart, a person who absorbs the world's pain until they collapse under its weight. Society has conditioned us to view this trait as a vulnerability, a crack in the armor that a dominant personality can easily exploit. This is what I call the baseline fallacy, and it is the single most catastrophic error a manipulator makes when selecting a target. You have been taught to look at empathy as a weakness, but in the cold reality of behavioral mechanics, true empathy is the most advanced, hyper-vigilant data-gathering system in the human arsenal. To understand this, you must completely strip away the spiritual and emotional connotations and look purely at neurology and survival. Empathy is not a mystical aura. It is a rapid, subconscious adaptation. It is a highly calibrated radar system developed, more often than not, in environments where accurately reading the room was a matter of psychological or physical survival. While you are engaging in surface-level conversation, focusing on the words being exchanged, the empath's brain is running a sophisticated, high-speed background program. They are not merely listening to you, they are reverse engineering your entire psychological architecture. To the untrained eye, human interaction appears as a finished, polished portrait. But the empath doesn't see the finished product. They see the rough, loose ink lines underneath. They see the bleeding watercolor washes of your true intent, the warm, mud-earth tones of hidden anxiety, suppressed anger, and concealed motives that you falsely believe you successfully painted over. They look right past the facade and instantly begin mapping your baseline. Your baseline is simply how you look, sound, and move when you are free from stress. It is your normal state of homeostasis. The empath establishes this baseline within the first few minutes of interaction, and from that moment on, they are measuring every single microscopic deviation with terrifying precision. When you attempt to deceive them, your cognitive load increases, and your autonomic nervous system inevitably leaks that stress. The average person misses this entirely, blinded by the flow of conversation. The empath, however, immediately registers the sudden, unnatural shift in your blink rate. They track the microtension in your masseter muscle that flashes for a fifth of a second. They notice the exact moment your vocal pitch rises by half an octave when a specific subject is breached, or how your feet subconsciously shift to point toward the exit when you feel internally threatened. You think you are projecting total confidence and control, but they are reading the terrified nervous system operating underneath the mask. They are silently compiling a comprehensive behavioral dossier on you, meticulously cataloging your insecurities, your ego triggers, and your cognitive blind spots. The baseline fallacy occurs because the empath initially chooses to respond to this overwhelming data with warmth. Because their primary drive is connection, they use this immense volume of behavioral intelligence to make you feel comfortable. They mirror your syntax, they modulate their voice to soothe your specific, unvoiced anxieties, and they give you exactly what you need to feel seen. A manipulator experiences this profound comfort and arrogantly mistakes it for submission. The predator believes they have found a compliant, gullible victim, completely oblivious to the fact that they just walked naked into a psychological X-ray machine, failing to realize that every time they test a boundary, the empath is simply adding another crucial data point to the file, waiting for the exact moment the behavioral equation shifts from compassion to, when you speak to a highly observant empath, you are operating under the dangerous assumption that you are simply having a conversation. You are not. You are actively participating in a comprehensive, real-time behavioral audit. The vast majority of people walk through the world believing they are impenetrable fortresses, convinced that they are successfully hiding their true intentions, their hidden shame, and their unspoken motives behind a veneer of rehearsed charm and confident smiles. But a subconscious profiler does not listen to the rehearsed script you are delivering. They are watching the frantic director behind the curtain pulling the levers. They are looking exclusively for the incongruence between what your vocal cords are projecting and what your autonomic nervous system is desperately leaking. Human deception, even on a micro level, is a remarkably messy biological process. To lie, or even to obscure a deep-seated insecurity, requires a tremendous amount of bandwidth and cognitive processing. Your brain must simultaneously suppress the truth, formulate a believable fabrication, and artificially orchestrate your body language to match the lie. This immense neurological effort creates friction, and that friction bleeds out into the physical world through microexpressions. These are involuntary facial spasms, flashes of authentic emotion that appear and vanish in less than a fifth of a second. You do not feel them happening on your own face, and 99% of the population will never register that they occurred. But to the subconscious profiler, these microscopic leaks are a blinding strobe light in a pitch-black room. You flash a micro-expression of contempt when a certain coworker's name is casually mentioned. You leak a micro-expression of genuine terror when the conversation briefly touches on a specific relationship dynamic. The empath catches every single one of these flashes, silently pinning them to a mental timeline, building a structural map of your psychological triggers without you ever realizing you are being studied. This relentless data collection extends far beyond merely detecting deception. It is about mapping the exact GPS coordinates of your vulnerabilities. As you navigate any social environment, the empath is silently noting the specific stimuli that cause your ego to inflate and the exact triggers that cause it to collapse. They watch the subtle, almost imperceptible way you physically reposition your torso when someone slightly more dominant enters the room. They archive the self-deprecating jokes you use as a preemptive defense mechanism, effortlessly reverse engineering them to locate the precise social anxiety that generated them in the first place. You are unknowingly handing over the master blueprints to your own psychological basement. They learn exactly what you desperately need external validation for, and they identify the precise form of criticism that would cause your carefully constructed persona to entirely disintegrate. As this mental archive expands, The empath begins to identify the invisible tracks that govern your entire life, your behavioral loops. Most people are completely blind to the fact that they live their lives on an endless, predictable loop. They deploy the identical manipulation tactics, retreat into the exact same victim narratives, and utilize the same aggressive posturing every single time their nervous system feels threatened. The subconscious profiler maps these intricate loops with such devastating accuracy that they can predict your subsequent behavior before the conscious thought even fully forms in your own frontal lobe. They know with mathematical certainty that if pressure is applied to point A, you will predictably, inevitably retreat to point B. This is not intuition, and it is not a mystical sixth sense. It is raw, unadulterated pattern recognition dialed up to a terrifying extreme. They are watching you play out a tragic script you do not even realize you are holding, compiling an encyclopedic knowledge of your psychological framework, quietly waiting for the day that all of this categorized data will be forcefully activated too. There is a profound and dangerous misconception that an empath's breaking point is a chaotic emotional event. People expect tears, hysterical outbursts, or a dramatic collapse into victimhood. They anticipate a messy, visible breakdown because that is how standard emotional exhaustion manifests in the general population. But when an empath is systematically pushed past their absolute threshold by a predatory personality, the reaction is not an explosion. It is an ice-cold, physiological implosion. This is the fracture point, and it is less of an emotional collapse and more of an aggressive, autonomous neurological override. For months, or perhaps years, this individual's nervous system has been heavily taxed, continuously suppressing their own biological alarm bells in a desperate, ongoing attempt to utilize their immense capacity for compassion to regulate the chaotic, toxic environment you have deliberately constructed. They have been functioning in a state of high-friction cognitive dissonance, internally screaming that they are in danger, while externally fighting to maintain connection and offer grace. But there is a hardwired limit to the human nervous system's capacity for sustained abuse. When a manipulator finally crosses the invisible, unforgivable line, when a specific boundary is violated with such malice or calculated indifference that the threat can no longer be rationalized, the empath's brain makes a definitive, irreversible decision. It stops prioritizing connection and instantly prioritizes survival. In a fraction of a second, the vagus nerve abruptly shifts gears, abandoning the social engagement system that governs warmth, eye contact, and emotional resonance. The brain's amygdala, which has been simmering in a state of chronic, low-grade anxiety, floods the system with a hyper-focused surge of cortisol and adrenaline, but not the kind that induces panic. It is a terrifyingly clarifying chemical cocktail that entirely shuts down the empath's capacity for affective empathy. The precise neurological pathways that previously allowed them to deeply feel your pain, to project positive intent onto your toxic behavior, and to internalize your manufactured guilt are suddenly and completely severed like a cut power line. The sudden absence of this emotional noise leaves behind a chilling, clinical vacuum. The physiological shift is visible if you know exactly what to look for. The subtle, accommodating micro-movements of their face freeze into a flat, unreadable affect. The sympathetic tilt of their head vanishes, replaced by a rigid, perfectly still cervical spine. Their respiratory rate drops and stabilizes into a slow, measured cadence. And the muscles around their eyes, the orbicularis oculi, responsible for communicating genuine warmth and vulnerability, completely disengage, resulting in the cold, dead, predatory stare that manipulators find so utterly disorienting. In this exact physiological moment, the empath fundamentally ceases to view you as a broken human being requiring rehabilitation, patience, or understanding. Their autonomic nervous system has unequivocally reclassified you. You are no longer a struggling partner, a difficult coworker, or a misunderstood friend. You have been instantly and permanently categorized as a biological threat. This shift is accompanied by a massive cognitive reorganization. All of the psychological data they have been passively gathering, the deep-seated insecurities they previously shielded you from, the behavioral loops they quietly accommodated, the fragile ego constructs they tiptoed around, is instantly transferred from the protective custody of their compassion directly into the targeting matrix of their survival instinct. The desperate need to fix you evaporates, replaced by an overwhelming, calculating clarity regarding exactly how to neutralize you. They are no longer trapped in the confusion of your gaslighting, because the emotional tether that made your manipulation effective has been entirely eradicated. The empathy has not disappeared. It is simply mutated, shedding its role as a nurturing protective blanket to become a highly calibrated surgical weapon designed to systematically dismantle the source of the threat, initiating a sequence of responses that guarantees you will never again have the proximity or the psychological leverage to. The transition from affective empathy to tactical empathy is the most chilling psychological pivot a human being can execute, and it is the exact moment the manipulator realizes they have made a fatal and irreversible miscalculation. Affective empathy is the biological drive to feel what another person is feeling, to mirror their emotional state in order to foster connection, provide comfort, and alleviate their suffering. It is a warm, enveloping, and accommodating energy. But when the fracture point is reached and the biological failsafe forcefully activates, that warmth is instantly sterilized. What remains in its wake is tactical empathy, the cold, highly clinical ability to understand the precise mechanics of another person's psychology without absorbing a single drop of their emotional weight. The empath is no longer walking in your shoes to understand your pain. They are walking in your shoes to meticulously map the exact layout of your internal minefield so they can systematically detonate it. You have to recognize that the empath possesses a terrifying, asymmetrical advantage. They have spent the entirety of your interaction conducting a comprehensive, silent interrogation. While you were busy deploying your rehearsed manipulation tactics, projecting false dominance, and assuming you were entirely controlling the narrative, they were quietly cataloging the raw, unfiltered data of your deepest psychological vulnerabilities. They know the specific tone of voice that triggers your deep-seated fear of inadequacy. They have mapped the exact behavioral loop that activates when your fragile ego is threatened, noting the precise physical tells, the sudden rigidity in your masseter muscle, the defensive shifting of your proximal zone, the microscopic break in your vocal cadence that betray your hidden, suppressed panic. They understand the exact type of external validation you are desperately addicted to, the psychological supply you absolutely require just to maintain your daily illusion of superiority and control. For months or even years, they utilize this intimate, high-definition knowledge to carefully navigate around your triggers, absorbing your toxic projections to keep your environment stable and your ego intact. But now, that exact same encyclopedic database of your flaws is fully weaponized. Weaponized observation is not about launching a chaotic, aggressive counterattack. It is about the surgical, almost invisible application of extreme psychological leverage. The empath does not need to raise their voice, throw insults, or engage in a frantic, escalating argument, because true power in behavioral dynamics is found in absolute, chilling stillness. They begin to deploy your own concealed insecurities against you with devastating, mathematical precision. They will purposefully inject a highly specific, carefully calibrated neuro-linguistic phrase into a casual conversation, a phrase designed entirely to spike your cognitive load and aggressively activate your limbic system, and then sit back with dead, unblinking eyes as they watch your autonomic nervous system completely short-circuit in real time. They will deliberately and systematically withhold the exact emotional supply they know you are starving for, watching you scramble, overcompensate, and rapidly unravel as your primary source of psychological regulation is abruptly and permanently cut off. You suddenly find yourself trapped in an agonizingly asymmetrical warfare scenario. You are flailing blindly in the dark, relying on outdated, blunt force manipulation tactics that are now entirely ineffective against a target who is no longer emotionally tethered to your reality, while they are operating with behavioral night vision goggles, effortlessly exploiting structural vulnerabilities you didn't even realize you had exposed. Every manipulation attempt you make is instantly recognized, clinically dissected, and effortlessly redirected back at your own foundation, neutralizing your offense before it even fully materializes in the physical space. The true, suffocating horror for the predatory personality is the profound, paralyzing realization that they are completely and utterly seen. The protective mask they spent a lifetime meticulously crafting has been effortlessly bypassed, and they are left entirely psychologically naked before someone who knows exactly where to place the scalpel to sever the last remaining threads of your manufactured identity, transforming their hyper-attunement into a psychological vice grip that methodically crushes your artificial sense of dominance, stripping away your defense mechanisms one by one until there is absolutely nothing left of your fabricated persona but the raw, terrified baseline you spent your entire life trying to hide, leaving you completely exposed and waiting for the final, devastating maneuver that will, when the surgical extraction is finally complete, the aftermath experienced by the manipulative personality is devoid of the cinematic, fiery retribution they inherently expected to face. You anticipate a loud, chaotic war because your entire psychological framework is built upon conflict, friction, and the relentless, exhausting struggle for dominance. You expect the empath to launch a smear campaign, to desperately attempt to rally allies, or to engage in a bitter, protracted screaming match, because those are the predictable, low-level behavioral loops you know exactly how to manage and manipulate. But a broken empath does not grant you the luxury of a battlefield. They understand that engaging with you in any capacity, even in anger, provides you with the exact emotional friction your ego requires to maintain its structural integrity. Instead of giving you a war, they give you an absolute, suffocating behavioral vacuum. This is the architecture of regret, and it is constructed entirely out of profound, devastating silence. The true horror for the predatory personality does not stem from what the empath actively does to them in the end, but from what the empath systematically and completely withdraws. For the entirety of your dynamic, this highly attuned individual functioned as your external regulatory system. They were the shock absorbers for your erratic limbic system, silently processing your projected toxicities, continually smoothing over the abrasive edges of your personality, and providing a constant, reliable stream of high-grade emotional supply that artificially inflated your fragile sense of self. They were essentially holding the fractured pieces of your fabricated identity together through the sheer force of their affective empathy, ensuring you never had to face the reality of your own dysfunction.